The president ditches the Iran nuclear deal and welcomes home 3 Americans detained in North Korea. Foreign policy expert Sebastian Gorka is here with analysis. And later, the president has revived the Office of Faith-Based Initiatives. But how effective will it be? Chairman of the Faith and Freedom Coalition, Ralph Reed, gives us his take and more. Finally, how do you balance the demands of career and family life? Is it possible to have it all? Catholic mom, radio host, and author of One Beautiful Dream, Jennifer FULWILER, will tell us. And I have some thoughts on that Met Gala, the world over. Begins right now.
Now, from Washington, D.C., Raymond Arroyo.
A warm welcome to all of you joining us in the United States and the world over. Sebastian Gorka, Ralph Reed, and Jennifer FULWILER are all straight ahead. If you'd like to comment on tonight's show, send me a tweet. I'm at Raymond Arroyo. Now, some news from the world over. On Tuesday, President Donald Trump announced that the United States is pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal. In signing the presidential memorandum withdrawing from the multi-nation agreement signed in 2015, Trump said the U.S. will reinstall the highest levels of sanction on the Islamic Republic. Later in the week, the president defended his decision, saying bedlam and death follow wherever Iran is involved. He added, however, that he is open to negotiating a new deal, but said, we're going to make either a really good deal for the world or we're not going to make a deal at all, end quote. It's been a busy foreign policy week for the White House. President Trump announced Thursday that the historic summit between he and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un will take place in Singapore on June 12th. Taking to Twitter, the president wrote, "We will both try to make it a very special moment for world peace." The announcement came hours after the president and first lady welcomed home in the middle of the night 3 Americans who were being held prisoner under the Kim regime. All 3 were accused of hostile and subversive acts against North Korea. Trump, looking ahead to the upcoming talks with North Korea, had this to say.
My proudest achievement will be, this is a part of it, but will be when we denuclearize that entire peninsula. This is what people have been waiting for a long time. We're starting off on a new footing. This is a wonderful thing that he released the folks early. That was a big thing, very important to me. And I really think we have a very good chance of doing something very meaningful.
Joining me now with analysis of all of this is foreign policy and national security expert and former Deputy Assistant to the President, Dr. Sebastian Gorka. He joins me in studio. Great to see you.
Great to be here, Raymond.
Okay, let's start. What a big day, what a big week this has been on the international front. Those 3 detainees were released in North Korea. Mike Pompeo, Secretary of State, goes and delivers them. He, of course, being criticized. He should have, where is he? He should be with the president, not out in North Korea making peace.
Shouldn't be out
what
working.
is he doing? Your take on this, the importance of this release, particularly these 3 American detainees.
Well, one facet of it is of importance above all else, that 3 American citizens came home without 1 pallet of cash being delivered to Pyongyang. Not only that, we gave them nothing. Not 140 billion, not 30 billion, not a photo opportunity with the president, absolutely nothing. That's the Trump way. This is how you treat dictatorships. The potential for a peace deal, I still think is very low because dictators lie. But at the end of the day, to get this from the regime without giving them anything, it tells you everything you need to know about what American leadership can truly achieve.
Chuck Schumer said the other day, Donald Trump should never have made this a prerequisite to a summit, that he's bargaining with American lives. Your take?
What has the last 30 years of that kind of thinking brought us on the Korean Peninsula? For 30 years, it's literally nuclear blackmail, concession out of concession squeezed out of the West, and at the same time, what? An escalation of ballistic missile launches across our allies like Japan, and not only that, illegal detonation of nuclear warheads in violation of all international norms. Along comes the 45th President of the United States, and everything changes. That's what I say to Chuck Schumer.
I want to show you this. This is the president announcing the future for this North Korean summit. Watch.
I really think we have a very good chance of doing something very meaningful. And if anybody would have said that 5 years ago, 10 years ago, even a year ago, you would have said that's not possible.
Now we know in Singapore on June 12th, the president will meet with Kim Jong-un. What do you expect from that? It seems you don't have a rosy outlook on this. Not so sure.
My parents grew up, they lived through fascist occupation and communist dictatorship. At the end of the day, the definition of a dictator is that they lie. Whether it's Hitler in Munich in 1948, whether it's Khrushchev denying the nuclear weapons he smuggled into Cuba in 1962, this is the nature of the beast. But we cannot know beforehand, before the 12th, whether he really is desperate and he realizes that the survival of his regime depends upon making true concessions. So I've always been very leery. Reagan said trust but verify. I say mistrust but verify. But if anybody can close the deal, it's Donald Trump.
Give me some sense. You were a part of some of this. It seems to my eye, from the outside, Donald Trump beautifully triangulated North Korea using Japan and China. Tell me how that happened and why they were so persuasive upon North Korea, and did they contribute to this, what we're seeing now, this summit?
With Japan, the president established a very, very close relationship on a personal level with Abe, even before the inauguration, during the transition, with phone calls, with visits. So yes, the connection was made instantly with Japan. With China, it was a little bit more difficult. Remember the Mar-a-Lago summit, much was promised. It was not delivered, and the president made his displeasure known publicly. And I think that had an effect on Beijing. But it's more than those two actors. With the president's trip to Asia, there was a far greater geopolitical play that we have determined that America is back and reassuring everybody, whether it's Australia, whether it's Singapore, or whether it's small nations that are simply worried about the rise of China and what have you. So I think it was a 180-degree sea change. And also I must commend and doff my cap. I know the head, the senior director for Asia at the NSC, former Marine, wonderful man. He is a true expert, speaks the language, speaks the local languages, and has the ear of the president.
Amazing. Let's move to this North Korean, or rather the Iran nuclear deal. This Iran nuclear deal is major. The president withdrawing from it this week. Here's what he said.
America will not be held hostage to nuclear blackmail. We will not allow American cities to be threatened with destruction, and we will not allow a regime that chants death to America to gain access to the most deadly weapons on earth. Today's action sends a critical message. The United States no longer makes empty threats. When I make promises, I keep them.
How do you curtail this regime of Iran with the mullahs today without an agreement in place?
Within an hour of the president making his announcement, I wrote a piece in The Hill where I said, we have the model. The model is the North Korean I call it the Pyongyang model. You reestablish the most stringent package of sanctions the world has ever seen. That's exactly what Nikki Haley did with Pyongyang. And you don't squeeze the country, because this isn't about Iranians. It's not about Koreans. You squeeze the elite and you make the survival of that regime economically unviable until they are forced to change behavior. When I was in the White House, the phrase we always looked for on behalf of the president was behavior modification. You don't do anything until they change their behavior, and that's what Iran has to do, and that'll be the metric. And America is the most powerful nation the world has ever seen. We can reimpose those sanctions by ourselves, and guess what? Europe will follow our lead.
I want to show you this. Nancy Pelosi, minority leader, reacting to this withdrawal from the Iran nuke deal. Watch.
President Trump's dangerous action leaves America isolated in regard to Iran. It erodes our international credibility during a critical moment with North Korea, and it recklessly puts the catastrophic threat of a nuclear-armed Iran back on the table. Democrats have no illusions about the Iranian regime. Democrats remain strongly committed to stopping the advancement of Iran's ballistic missile program, its egregious human rights abuses in Iran, and its unacceptable support of terrorism.
She says that this destabilizes the world.
Can I tell you what defies comprehension? Giving a regime that at the time and still today is declared by the State Department, our State Department, as the biggest sponsor of state terrorism, giving that regime $150 billion. That defies comprehension. The idea that you're dealing with a murderous dictatorship and you give them everything up front and sign a deal that has no functional sanctions, which has an inspection regime where Americans are not allowed to be part of the inspections, and also doesn't allow the IAEA to even look at military sites. You're not going to build nuclear weapons at civilian sites. The whole thing was an absolute disgrace to begin with. But of course, it has to be protected because it was the only part of the Obama legacy left standing.
Rouhani, the president in Iran, is saying he was ordering Iran's Atomic Energy Agency to go ahead with the preparation of resume their enrichment plan, and they're going to push their luck here. At the same time, he says, we have to abide by the agreement. Can he do both?
Look, they've been lying and they've been in breach of the agreement since the get-go, thanks to this amazing half-a-ton worth of intelligence that was done by Prime Minister Netanyahu 2 weeks ago. We know that it was all done in bad faith. The Ahmad nuclear weapons program simply went underground, and they've been developing, their capabilities and getting billions of dollars for the last 3 years.
And what many people don't realize, they've been able to renew all of their sales to Europe and around the world in the process, which means billions of more dollars are flowing into their economy. Now, with this action, the president imposing sanctions on the sale of oil, it will give our European allies 90 to 180 days to sever those ties. So this is really hitting our relationship with the European Union. How will it affect that? Does that imperil some of the other negotiations we are in the midst of?
It will lead to a very simple question being asked and answered by our European friends. Do they wish to maintain relations with a theocratic dictatorship? Is it worth endangering their relationship with their biggest trading partner, America, to keep a dictatorial regime in place? I would ask these people, whether it's Siemens, whether it's whoever it is, look yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, would you have done the same with Hitler? Would you have done the same with the Soviet Union? If not, why are you doing it with Iran?
You saw the statement from Macron, Angela Merkel, Theresa May, our three biggest allies in Europe. They all say they're standing by the Iran agreement and, quote, this is a binding international legal framework for the resolution of the dispute. They claim this could imperil the United States and put it in violation of the Security Council agreement. You would say what?
I would say it is not a binding agreement because it was never a resolution of the United Nations Security Council. That's absolutely absurd. It was as valuable and as legally binding as that piece of paper Chamberlain waved when he came back from Munich in 1938. It's a chimera. It's an illusion.
Tell me about what we're seeing in the Middle East. In the wake of this withdrawal, Iran began to flex its muscles a bit in Syria, where it has strongholds, sending nukes toward or missiles toward Israel. Israel retaliated this week. What's happening there? And is the withdrawal from the Iran nuke deal to blame for that action?
They had to do something. Iran had to rattle a rusty saber. But the most important aspect that everybody's missing is that within hours of Iran taking these actions from Syrian territory, Assad's government disavowed these actions and said, we had nothing to do with this, we were not in the chain of command, and we had no knowledge Iran was doing this. That's a turn up for the books. When Assad, the dictator, is actually angry and disavowing his largest sponsor for these actions, the jigsaw puzzle may be coming apart in that part of the world to the benefit of America and Israel.
Walk people through it, because again, we pay very little attention to international affairs. People, they read headlines and they move on. What Donald Trump did in Saudi Arabia Give me a sense of what dividends that is now paying and what he established there by engaging in the heart of the Middle East, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
I encourage your viewers, Raymond, for the purposes of posterity, read the Riyadh speech by the president and the Warsaw speech. These are the two most historic speeches the president has yet to give, and I think they will go down as potentially his most important speeches. In Warsaw, he reaffirmed the Judeo-Christian character of our nation and that we stand by any country that shares those values. In Riyadh, he was the catalyst. He said to the assembled 52, 53 Arab Muslim heads of state, gentlemen, you have a problem and you have to solve it. He literally said you must rout the extremists from your places of worship and the terrorists from your communities. What happened? The whole geopolitical structure of the Middle East changed. There was a tectonic shift whereby today, think of this, Raymond, today one of the closest allies of Israel is Saudi Arabia. That's the effect that Donald Trump has had on the region.
And they and Iran have always been at odds.
Yes.
This deepened that divide.
There is a new constellation of allies in the Middle East that can finally bring stability and that are coming together to push against this theocratic, dictatorial regime that wishes to export their model of caliphate. ISIS had their Sunni extremist model. That's now absolutely gone, thanks to America. Now the challenge that is left is the Shia version of the caliphate that they've been trying to export from Yemen to Iraq for years now.
Tell me for a moment about Gina Haspel. She had her hearing this week on Capitol Hill, the nominee for head of the CIA. She has been attacked by a number of senators, Kamala Harris comes to mind, for her unwillingness to condemn waterboarding and enhanced interrogation as an immoral act. Your thoughts on that and the prospects for her nomination?
She'll get confirmed, but what we saw yesterday is truly outrageous. Everybody who was trying to lambast her and question a 30-plus year veteran of the intelligence community was trying to criticize her for executing methods and using techniques that they had approved of. Let's not forget, after 9/11, the senators and congressmen on Capitol Hill were petrified. After the anthrax attack, they were scared for their own lives, and they said, oh, enhance interrogation, whatever we have to do. And the most dastardly aspect of this is that this woman has been going to Congress for months now as acting head of the CIA. Nobody batted an eyelid. They respected her. They treated her as the acting head. Oh, and suddenly, now that I want to be the Democrat candidate for president, now I'm going to do a 180 and start attacking her. The only problem with Gina Haspel, Raymond, is that she's a woman who's going to be made the first ever female director of the CIA under Donald Trump. That's her sin.
Let's leave it there. Dr. Sebastian Gorka, always a pleasure. Thank you for being here. And the new book, Why We Fight by Dr. Gorka, is available for pre-order now. It comes out this summer. You don't want to miss that. And, of course, his Defeating Jihad is available at bookstores everywhere and online. Before we go to Ralph Reed, here are some other important stories to share with you. The dispute among the German bishops over intercommunion has been left in limbo by Pope Francis when he abstained from ruling on the matter. This past week, members of the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith discussed with German bishops on both sides of the issue whether Protestant spouses should be admitted to Holy Communion under certain conditions. After the discussion, a message was relayed from Pope Francis, asking the German bishops to find, in a spirit of ecclesial communion, a unanimous result if possible. Two leading cardinals have since criticized the Pope's non-decision. Cardinal Gerhard Müller, a German who was former head of the CDF, said the Pope's statement contained no answer to the central, essential question. He told the National Catholic Register a clear expression of the Catholic faith is needed. The Pope should affirm the faith. On the specific matter, Müller stressed that it is not possible to be in sacramental communion without being in ecclesial communion. In an opinion piece also published in the National Catholic Register, Dutch Cardinal Willem Eyck wrote that since church teaching on the matter is perfectly clear, the Pope's decision to send it back to the bishops of Germany for further consideration is, quote, completely incomprehensible. And on Capitol Hill, Father Patrick Conroy, the recently ousted chaplain of the U.S. House of Representatives, was welcomed back to his office this week. He met with House Speaker Paul Ryan. The Jesuit priest had come under fire, reportedly, for being too political and not providing adequate pastoral care to members of Congress. Democrats decried the sacking, claiming Father Conroy was fired by the Republican leader for an opening prayer he gave on the House floor last year in the midst of the tax reform debate. Additionally, Democrats said anti-Catholic sentiment by Republican members and one of Ryan's aides also played into his firing. Speaker Ryan, who is Roman Catholic, looked to clear the air and move forward. Here with analysis is the founder and chairman of the Faith and Freedom Coalition, Ralph Reed. Ralph, thanks for being here.
Raymond, good to be with you.
Pleasure seeing you, and thanks for coming in. I want to talk about this House chaplain controversy on Capitol Hill. Father Patrick Conroy has been there for 7 years. The Speaker asked him to step away from the post because he was negligent in the area of counseling. Some of the members felt he just wasn't up to snuff, and that he had gotten more partisan than pastoral, one-on-one and in masses and homilies he offered in the Capitol. Your thoughts on why we're here and it became such a divisive thing on Capitol Hill? Now he's been reinstated.
Yeah, I don't know all the details. I mean, the Speaker is a good friend of mine. I've known him for many years. I think very highly of him. As I don't need to tell you, he is a faithful and devout Catholic. But I will just say this. Based on my knowledge of the members, and obviously a lot of them are friends of mine, what they need is somebody who can pray for them, who can work with them and their families. This is a very tough job. They're commuting, they're under fire, they're having to raise money for their campaigns and vote and you know, travel, and it's an extremely difficult job that puts a lot of strain on marriages and families. And I think the most important thing for the chaplain in either chamber is to have a pastor's heart. And to be able to really be there for those people in their moment of need.
Well, I think some were trying to politicize this when it happened. And we saw that, well, everything in this town gets politicized. And if you talk to members, as you and I do, I spoke to about 8 members the week this happened. Some of whom complained about Father Conroy. And they said, look, I went to him in this matter. I was having a family difficulty. And I felt he just wasn't all that concerned about me. So she went to the Senate chaplain for relief. That, I heard that again and again and again. That, it seems to me, is the reason that this was why Paul Ryan asked the chaplain to step down. That is, of course, not the way it was played. And in his letter to Paul Ryan this past week, Father Conroy said, I inquired as to whether or not it was for cause. Mr. Burks, Jonathan Burks is Paul Ryan's chief of staff, mentioned dismissively something like, maybe it's time that we had a chaplain that wasn't Catholic. Now, I spoke to a number of members. They said what actually happened is he said, we want to open this up to other denominations. He didn't say somebody not Catholic. He said, we're going to open it up to all denominations and let the members figure this out. Should the members on Capitol Hill have a greater say in who that chaplain is? John Boehner chose Father Conroy on his own authority.
I think that would be a good idea, but ultimately I defer to the leadership's decision on this. I mean, you know, this is an internal House matter that involves the spiritual counseling and pastoring of those members and their families. That's highly personal, and I just don't feel comfortable you know, prejudging it from the outside.
I'm going to play this. This is Paul Ryan reacting to really the coming together. He allowed Father Conroy to return to the Capitol, and he said this.
Father Pat and I had a good cup of coffee this morning. We talked about how to improve the services going forward. We're going to keep talking to make sure that I think we can ultimately make improvements so that everyone has access to the pastoral service they're looking for. And so we had a good meeting this morning. We're going to keep talking, and I feel good about where things are.
It seems he, too, has that focus, the pastoral services. It's not about politics or anything else.
No, and it shouldn't be.
Tell me about a meeting that we've been reading about in June. Evangelical leaders are going to sit with President Trump to discuss this whole Stormy Daniels situation. Now, it seems to me, there's been a lot of coverage in the media about this. When I talk to evangelicals or Catholics, this is not high on their list of to-dos, scolding the president for what may or may not have happened related to this Stormy Daniels thing. Why are evangelicals standing by the president. He's up to now 75% in the latest poll of support
Approval
from
among
evangelicals. Why isn't this eroding support from him?
Well, I think it's primarily because there were promises made, and those promises have been kept. This president won 81% of the self-identified evangelical vote, won the Catholic vote, by the way, which is the swing vote in American politics, and he overperformed among both constituencies for a non-incumbent presidential candidate, got the highest number ever recorded among evangelicals since exit polling began. Part of that was fear of Hillary Clinton, honestly, but part of it was the very tangible, explicit promises he made. I mean,
like what?
Well, like being the first major party nominee in American history to release a list of jurists and say, with respect to an open Supreme Court seat, that if you elect me, I will choose one of these 21. Not, Raymond, I will choose someone like these jurists.
Right.
I will choose from this list. Now, why was that so important? It was because with Scalia gone, it was a 4-4 court. And there had not been an open seat on the Supreme Court at a time of a presidential election in a century. So that was a big deal. His pro-life promises, when he was in the debate with Hillary Clinton and was asked about late-term abortion, and she was dismissive, and he said, and I'm paraphrasing, what she just said is she would be okay with ripping the baby from its mother's womb just before it was born. She may be okay with that. I am not. Now, Raymond, if you look at all those promises, and then you look at what he's done to work to defund Planned Parenthood under the Medicaid program, what he's done in moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem,
Very important.
withdrawing from the Iran nuclear deal, appointing Neil Gorsuch to the U.S. Supreme Court, who was on the list of 21.
We are proud of
the
our
16
religious
appellate
heritage,
court
Mr.
judges that he has appointed, by the way, 2 of whom were on that list of 21. Don Willett from the state Supreme Court in Texas. These, look, from a policy and personnel standpoint, leaving aside for a minute one's personal political views of Donald Trump, this has been an extremely faith-friendly, pro-life administration that has kept its promises to the voters. And that's a big deal.
So why are they having a sit-down with him in June, evangelical leaders? Are you part of that?
Well, I've
table?
heard about that meeting. It's not clear to me that that meeting is going to happen.
Okay.
I would think it is highly unlikely that if such a meeting does happen, that people are going to ask him about unsubstantiated personal allegations from 10 or 12 years ago. My own view is, look, I said in the 1990s when Bill Clinton was president, I said this in a book, and I said it in an op-ed in Newsweek when Newsweek was still
in
print
business,
magazine.
when you could still find it on the news.
You could still find it. I said that some of the criticism of Bill Clinton had been harsh and personal, and therefore risked damage to the office that he occupied, and that we should stay focused as a faith community on policy. And I went on to say, Raymond, and this is a direct quote, if Bill Clinton is a sinner, then he is no worse than you or me. Now, I would like to see the liberal faith leader who's willing to say that now about Donald Trump. I think we ought to stay focused on policy and leave those kinds of judgments to individual voters.
Well, it's also, and I've heard some say, look, if a president does something while president in office, that is of national importance. What a man or woman might have done in their previous life, you can't go back and remake the past. And the fact is he was elected after that. So what impact does that have on the national conversation or national policy today? It doesn't.
Yeah,
really.
and there's a lot of revisionist history going on about the faith community's response to Bill Clinton's personal imbroglios. If you go back and look at what happened in impeachment, it wasn't whether he was whether he was with a woman who was not his wife. It was suborning of perjury. It was participating in the filing of a false affidavit. It was obstruction of justice. And it was lying under oath and committing perjury himself. Now, those kinds of official misdeeds are going to lead to some kind of an official response. What the attacks on Donald Trump, if true, would be disappointing. But they are not disqualifying unless you can demonstrate some sort of an official connection to his public and official duties.
Before I let you go, I want to talk about this White House Office of Faith and Opportunity that the president initiated just last week. You were there. Many evangelical Catholic leaders were present as well. What does it really mean, though? Because to my eye, the president has not appointed a director of this office, and there are many adjacent offices at the various agencies of the government that also have no leadership. So what does it really mean that he's restarted this office?
Well, what it means is two things. Number one, Obama diminished the faith-based program and the initiative. He moved it over to the Department of Health and Human Services. Right. He basically moved it out of the White House. The director of this office, once appointed, and I think that is going to be soon, is going to report not directly to the president, but it's going to be a virtually direct report. And the other thing that's going to happen is this office has been given a new mission and responsibility to ensure not only that the faith-based armies of compassion that are out there ministering to the homeless and the left behind and the marginalized every single day, and 90% of the charitable work done in America today is done particularly to the poor, mostly by churches in the faith-based community. Not only is it going to assure that they're no longer discriminated against when it comes to funding for that work, but even more importantly, it's going to ensure that religious freedom and religious liberty are respected
throughout the federal government.
The execution of those responsibilities. And I think that's a really big deal, and I commend the president for doing it.
Before we part, the Boy Scouts, the Church of Latter-day Saints came out today and said they're severing their relationship with the Boy Scouts. They constitute 20% of scouting. 70% of scouting is made up of faith-based groups.
Right.
What reaction do you think the rest of the faith-based community might have to this? And it's a combination, I think, if you read between the lines of the Mormon statement. It seems they were upset that the Scouts allowed gay Scout leaders, and now that they're allowing girls into the ranks of the Boy Scouts.
Yeah, well, speaking as somebody who grew up in Troop 77 in Toccoa, Georgia, and is an Eagle Scout and has served on the board of my local council, I'm very disappointed. And I think that the Boy Scouts, when they took the stand that they took with regard to gay Scouts and Scoutmasters, did the right thing for the purpose of shepherding and protecting the young boys who were their charge. I think it was the right thing to do. They reversed course on that, and now there have been women leaders for some time. Yeah. I went with my sons to Scout camp, and they were there then, and they do a great job. But I think to really see the Scouts lose the uniqueness of their historic role of inculcating timeless and eternal principles and values in young boys on the way to their becoming men. Boys and girls are different.
They do, and they learn different.
They learn different, and it's a special challenge to help young boys learn how to become men. And Scouting has historically done that, and so I hate to see what's happened.
Yeah. Ralph Reed, thank you for being here.
Raymond, you too.
For more on Ralph Reed's Faith and Freedom Coalition, visit ffcoalition.com. Finally tonight, how can you make the most of an imperfect life given the daily struggles of family and career? My next guest is here to tell us how she did it. She's the host of her own radio show on Sirius XM, the mother of 6, and author of the aptly titled new book, One Beautiful Dream, the rollicking tale of personal passions, family chaos, and saying yes to them both. Here's my exclusive interview with Jennifer Fulwiler. Jennifer, I want to start with, the book focuses really on this tension I think not only mothers have, but fathers as well. How do you balance the things you're called to with your family and the obligations around you, to say nothing of the other challenges that crop up? What does having it all mean to you now?
Yeah, that's such a great question, Raymond. I used to think of having it all as you had your corporate job and you were Mary Poppins and you were Martha Stewart as a woman anyway, and combining all of these things, doing all the things. And now I think that having it all is really a question of fulfillment, being who you're meant to be, and thinking outside the box to make those things happen.
You have a quote in the book. You say, you can have it all in the sense of having a rich family life and pursuing excellence in your work, but you're going to have to need to reimagine what having it all looks like. So I guess that's really what the book is all about and kind of captures. It is a messy, hilarious story in many ways. Tell me about because you were really, I think, and One Beautiful Dream captures it so well. You were under the weight, I think, of life, and you felt the burdens around you so powerfully. Then you spoke to your friend Hallie at one point. What happened in that moment that changed the way you thought about what you were going through?
Well, to put it bluntly, Raymond, we got honest. Before I was trying to be the best wife and mother I could be. I knew nothing about motherhood going into it, so I'm really trying to do this right. And I thought that if I were to admit to anyone that, honestly, I don't feel fulfilled and I'm really struggling, people would interpret it like I'm saying I don't love my family or something. So there was this moment with my friend Hallie where the dam broke and I said, I am not happy. And she looked at me and she said, I'm not either.
Huh. And what realization, what came out of that realization that you weren't alone in this?
That we both realized that we had been suppressing our talents and our gifts and our dreams because we thought it was the right thing to do. And that was the moment we looked at each other and we said, are we so sure that this is the right thing to do? That just because we are dedicated to our families, just because we do want to be good mothers, are we so sure that there is no room for exploring our talents and pursuing our own personal passions?
Tell me for a moment about resistance. You have a chaplain on resistance that people meet, now not in the political sense, but the resistances that we feel in everyday life. What was holding you back from pursuing those talents, those gifts, those things you felt called to?
Raymond, resistance can come in so many different forms, and I think it hits different people differently. For me, that resistance was the message that if you pursue your personal passions, if you have even a shred of ambition, well, you're not dedicated to your family. And that was the message that held me back. And it was only when I realized that this is not an either-or discussion, being a dedicated parent, putting God and family first, and being the person you're meant to be, doing the things that you love, pursuing your ambitions. This is not an either-or discussion. It's a question of how we have both and.
Which makes things much more complicated.
Oh, so complicated. And I think you see that in the book. This is a messy book. I do not for a minute pretend that I have it all together.
Yeah, no, you reveal a lot here, some of it very personal. Your financial woes, your personal struggles, feelings of inadequacy, health crises. I mean, things kind of, you feel the temperature rising as you get into this book. There was a moment where you're pregnant with your fourth child and you're very concerned about now having a much larger family. And the difference from 1 to 2 and from 2 to 4 is an enormous number. And then you see a Mexican family outside of church one day, which brought you to what realization?
It brought me to the realization that when we think of family size and our life's goals and anything in life, we need to have what Sheldon Vonnegut called a wholeness of vision. Isn't that a great phrase?
Yeah.
Wholeness of vision, meaning when you're making your life choices, whether it's thinking about adopting a child, having a child, serving your community, whatever it is, a big work decision, think about, what will you think about all of this at the end of your life? And when I looked at that family, my dad's from Mexico. I have a great connection to the Mexican-American community. Yeah. And when I saw them in this life-filled culture where everything is all about family and they're always putting love and family first, I realized, man, they've got it all figured out, and I think I could learn a little bit from them.
Well, there's another layer of complication here in that you have a blood disorder that when you're pregnant, there's a clotting that takes place that can kill you.
Yeah, well, yes.
Was there any hesitation? I mean, you talk in detail here. What did you go through with each pregnancy? I mean, you have 6 children now.
Right.
There had to be a point where you said, this could be the last child I carry.
We did. With each pregnancy, we looked at it and we did our homework and we talked to doctors and we thought that we had it managed. And you see what happened in the book is that unraveled very quickly. In my 6th pregnancy, I had bilateral pulmonary embolisms. My lungs were full of blood clots, and this happened while I was on blood thinners. So it's a very scary situation. They said if you get pregnant again, then there's nothing we can do because you already had pulmonary embolisms while you're on blood thinners. It's a scary situation.
Wow. But you pressed forward nonetheless. How did your faith take you through that? The first time you did this, by the way, when you were first pregnant, you were an atheist.
Oh yeah, right.
You're out there with no no net.
Yeah, well, I was actually diagnosed right before we came into the Catholic Church. That happened right before we became Catholic. And my husband and I are both converts to Catholicism. We are also both only children. I have atheist background, and so coming into this, and you see this in One Beautiful Dream, that you see me wrestling with, where does faith fit into this picture, and how can I be not just the best wife, not just the best mother, but the best Christian I can be, but still balance everything from my health issues to ambition to everything else?
There's a line in the book I want to read to you where it's really when you and Joe, your husband Joe, come together, you're starting your family, and you write, God burst into our lives with all the subtlety of a neutron bomb, shattered everything we thought we knew, snatched up our carefully crafted plans, and set them on fire. Then gave us a big hug and tossed us onto a path that we could never have imagined for ourselves. What's the lesson here for people who are facing similar situations? And there are a lot of people at home that no doubt are going through similar crises, worries, concerns, life and death situations, and financial woes.
I don't think you have any choice but to see it as an adventure. And life can be really hard, and life can get really messy. And you know what? It will. If you're on this same pursuit that I am, trying to be the person you were meant to be and still put your priorities in the right order, it is going to get difficult. It is going to get messy. And guess what? You're going to fail. You're going to make the wrong decisions. You're going to make mistakes. But Raymond, I mean, do we really have a choice but to just turn it over to God and say, all right, it's an adventure?
There's one moment in One Beautiful Dream. First, why did you call it One Beautiful Dream?
There's a quote from St. Francis of Rome, one of my favorite saints, where she did not intend to go into the married life. She wanted to be a cloistered nun in a convent. She ended up getting married, and she so threw herself into this life that she never expected and initially didn't want, that at the end of her husband's life, he turned to her and said, my whole life has been one beautiful dream of purest happiness, thanks to your love. I also like the play on dream. Dream can mean something you aspire to, a goal. It can also mean something that feels surreal. And so I like the double meaning of the word dream in this case.
Well, at times it takes on the cast of a nightmare, Jennifer.
It does.
I mean,
you're so right.
There's a moment where you're in bed, you're on bed rest for like a month.
Yeah.
You know, you can't leave the bed. The health bills are piling up on your husband's side of the bed. You've got children running around. Friends come over, people from church who have a meal ministry basically bail you out, and they present you with food. What did you learn through that? And how did it change the way you approach or accept these challenges?
It shattered my entire worldview, Raymond, because it showed me you can't do it alone. And by it, I mean faith. I mean life. I mean anything that you are trying to do. You know, I don't think we realize here in the United States and just in the West in general, we don't realize how individualistic we are. We always want to be able to do everything perfectly ourselves, to be perfectly self-sufficient. That is not historical Christian view. I mean, that is not really what we're supposed to be doing. And it took me having everything fall apart in my life, my health, my finances, before I got a clue and realized none of us were meant to do any of this alone.
I mean, you talk about, and it's a nice idea, it's a good thought, that we can have it all if we change the definition of all. However, that said, you meet a Father George at confession who tells you something that reorients really the way you consider life and that balance between family and the work you're called to, which, I'm sorry, those two things can be in opposition many times. The time that the family demands, you need to give to your work, particularly if you're doing something like broadcast, which looks like we're just making this up and it's fun. The truth of the matter is there's a lot of research involved. You got to read the book. In your case, you got to write the book. What did he tell you that changed everything for you?
He said, think like you are a member of an orchestra and not a soloist. He said, you've been approaching your life like you're a violinist soloist up on a stage. Think like you are part of an orchestra. You can still create something beautiful. You can create something more beautiful. You just have to understand that you are part of something bigger. And yes, your work, playing your music matters, but it matters more when it's part of something bigger.
The quote in the book, you quote him, and it says, unite your family, bring them into what you do, and bring what you do into your family. Move in unity, not apart from each other. That's a really important, crucial thing that so many people miss. I mean, I know a number of very successful people, and they've lost their family on the road to unbelievable success. Yeah. But is that successful?
It's not, and you'll never think it is at the end of your life. My husband and I both come from very careerist backgrounds, that worldview where all happiness is contained in having the right business card. And we see people now, as life gets played out, they're waking up one day, they're 50, 60, 70 years old, and they're saying, I made a mistake. I made the wrong choices.
Yeah, and that's a horrible realization to make, because then you can't change, you really can't do anything about it. The past is dead. You talk at length in One Beautiful Dream about that desire to write your first book.
Yeah.
And we see you go through the trials, the tensions. I mean, you're writing chapters in cars, trying to get the manuscript off. This particularly resonated with me because I know the mania of this. You know, you write in between, you write when you can. It reminded me, there's a wonderful Joseph Conrad story. It might be in his diary somewhere. And he talks about, he had a sick wife and a child with 100-and-something fever, and they're in the other room, and he still returns to the table to finish the chapter. And I often think of that, you know, that and the Sondheim line, you know, finishing the hat, how you have to finish the hat. You look at the world through a window while you finish the hat. There is some of life you trade on to create a book or anything, really.
Right.
How do you find that balance?
I think you take it one day at a time, and you realize that the right answer for your choices with what you do with your time, the right answer last week might not be the right answer this week. And you see this in the book, Raymond. There were times that I was trying to finish that first manuscript that I said, it's time to walk away. I sense it. My kids need me. My family needs me. I need to walk away. Then there were other times where I said, you guys go watch 5 hours of Netflix. I'm getting this done. I don't care cupcakes for lunch. I am finishing this chapter. And I think you just have to accept that it is really moment-by-moment decisions.
Yeah, no, it's an improvisatory act.
Yeah, it is.
That's
I
what
love
the
that.
book is really. You see that improvisatory quality. You kind of have to roll with the punches, and the punches keep coming from ways you don't expect, and in dimensions that you never quite anticipate, I think. Tell me, now looking back, you've now got 2 books to your credit. You've got a radio show every day.
2 hours a day.
What does prep time look like? You have to prep for this radio show. You don't wing a 2-hour radio show. So where do you find time to do that?
I have dedicated time where I shut the door to my studio and I do it guilt-free, and I turn off my phone and I say nobody can bother me. And a big thing for me, Raymond, was letting go of that guilt, saying, no, you cannot ask me where your lunch is. No, you cannot text me. This is my hour, 2 hours before I go on the air. I need this time. I have this commitment to my audience and to my job. And I think you have to do it unapologetically.
You are a graduate of the University of Texas.
That's right.
Where they have recently made a decision to describe masculinity as a mental health issue. You're the mother of 2 children, 2 boys. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I didn't know the University of Texas was so traditionalist, subscribing to these gender binary views. I thought there was no such thing as men and women. So why are we even having this discussion?
Apparently there is.
What do these words even mean? I think as a mother, I think that this is in conflict, frankly, with ideas of individualism, letting people be who they're meant to be. There are some boys who are more masculine than others. Frankly, I think it's in contradiction to the women's empowerment movement, things like women's sports, you know, that sort of thing. When we blur these lines between what gender is all about, a lot of times it's actually women who end up getting impacted. When you have, you know, someone who was born a man joining a women's sports team, that kind of thing. I think it's a ridiculous, and as usual, women are going to pay the price.
Yeah. Tell me about the Edel Gathering, which you founded Tell me about this.
All right, so we pronounce it Adele, perhaps,
sorry.
but we might be wrong. Actually, we don't know what we're doing.
I don't know. I just read it. So what do I know?
So it is a gathering for Catholic women, and here's our mission, Raymond. Very noble mission here. We believe in bringing Catholic women together through good wine and bad karaoke.
Oh, I already like it.
We felt like there were a lot of wonderful retreats out there where women can, get up at 7 o'clock in the morning and pray the rosary, and we've got that in the Catholic world. And we said, let's stay up till midnight and drink wine. We think there's a place for that too. So our conference starts at noon and it goes until midnight. And there is the worst karaoke you have ever heard, at least when I'm on the stage. And it is a chance for Catholic women to get together informally. And you know what's funny is we have so many women walk away who say, I walked into this gathering losing my faith. And now that I have seen that I can let down my hair and I can, frankly, to be cool with other Catholic women, I think I can do this. Like, I think I'm going to go back to Mass, and I think I'm coming back to
Well, there is this thing. I had an interview earlier, and they were talking about how did you feel about leaving the secular world and embracing Catholic journalism? Well, I've never done that. I said, I don't know how that feels because I've never done that. I didn't know there was some island of perfection out here. And I'd love the address because I would like to go there. I've never been to this island of Catholic perfection. The one I see is pretty messy, filled with scandals. You got people attacking each other. This is the world. It's called the world. And you're Catholic in that world. And maybe that's what your gathering is sort of appealing to. It's a recognition that we're whole people, we're in a real world that's conflicted and messy, and we have something to offer and can still have a good time doing it.
Can I write that down and make that our mission statement?
There you go.
I really like that.
Put that down as your mission statement. Who did you write the book for? When I read it, I thought this could also be called, not One Beautiful Dream, but Embrace the Mess. Because
I love it.
It's kind of, it's the mess of life. It's the mess we all deal with, whether we admit it or not. You're a lot more candid than I would be. But we all deal with the chaos of life. And bringing order and excellence out of that is always a challenge. Who did you write this book for?
I wrote it for anyone who struggles between their obligations and their passions. And honestly, Raymond, I'm getting some of the strongest feedback from single people who say, I have the same struggle in my life. I'm volunteering at my church. I'm taking care of my parents. And I'm wondering, where do my ambitions and my goals fit into this process? I wrote it for anyone who lives in that struggle.
I love it. The book, One Beautiful Dream, the rollicking tale of family chaos, personal passions, and saying yes to them both. Why the burnt chicken on that? Are you responsible for this?
I am responsible for this. That was actually the 17th cover that we did. Please pray for the people at my publishing house.
You're like me. All the graphics design people hate you, Jennifer.
I was at a publishing industry party. I made a joke in front of the people from my publisher that I was the most high-maintenance author they had ever worked with in terms of cover. And Raymond, they all just laughed nervously, and nobody contradicted that statement.
They didn't. Well, I know the feeling. That was after me. That's right. Well, you were not quite the most. The second most. Jennifer FULWILER, thank you for being here. One Beautiful Dream, the rollicking tale of family chaos, personal passions, and saying yes to them both by Jennifer FULWILER is available now at bookstores everywhere and online. Now, before we go tonight, some thoughts on this week's Metropolitan Museum Gala and the patrimony of the Catholic Church. Let's cut to the chase. The decadent spectacle at the Met Gala in New York early this week is not unlike the spectacles of years past. Celebrities flouncing up the stairs in outlandish costumes, drawing attention to themselves, that's pretty routine. What made this year's Met Gala distinctive was that it came with the seeming imprimatur of the Catholic Church. Titled Heavenly Bodies, Fashion, and the Catholic Imagination, the exhibit was billed as a dialogue between fashion and the Church. Sadly, fashion is the only part of the dialogue being heard. Anna Wintour, with the aid of some Met donors, got the Vatican's Sistine Chapel sacristy to loan out about 40 vestments, mitres, gloves, tiaras, and other items to the Met as an exhibition. All I can say is the Church should have placed greater conditions and limits on the loan. The Metropolitan used the collection as a jumping-off point to inspire contemporary designers to create their own costumes and gowns. So a dalmatic of Pope Pius IX is presented with Coco Chanel and Versace's. Along with a bizarre cross-studded bondage mask is a very low-cut red gown. The juxtaposition and proximity is borderline sacrilege. To Catholics, these liturgical items point to a sacred reality, mainly to Jesus Christ, truly present on the altar, which is the place these religious garments were meant to inhabit. Taken out of that reality, sapped of their true meaning, they become over-the-top, operatic brocade and jeweled camp. This was never intended to be streetwear. So yes, it does grate Catholic sensibilities when celebrities affect the externals of Catholic worship and turn something sacred into a silly masquerade, which is what happened at the opening night Met Gala. There was Rihanna as a beaded popessa in a miniskirt and mitre. Jared Leto came as a stoled King of Kings. Lana Del Rey sported a strange Lady of Sorrows getup, a display that made someone to drive a sword through their own hearts. There were many others. Katy Perry, Madonna, Frances McDormand appeared as a, I don't know what. Maybe she was the Garden of Eden after the fall. This is what comes of the church treating its sacred vestments and articles like museum pieces. They only get trotted out by museums, and no one knows quite what to make of them when they do. It didn't surprise me at all that the Hollywood set avoided the polyester suits and the unadored green vestments that have become de rigueur for most parishes today. Perhaps there's a lesson in that. Fulton Sheen once said, when the church puts something down, the world takes it up. Now they've taken up the church's fashion without the faith. But just imagine if the Met had allowed the glitterati to ape and wrap themselves in the devotions or garb of Islam or Judaism or even Native Americans. Profaning their religious items and art would not have been tolerated. The Vatican now says they knew nothing of the gala, only the exhibition. Surely their contacts in New York knew about this gala. The Vatican allowed the Sistine Chapel Choir to sing at the Met Gala. If the boys flew out of Italy, somebody had to know. Along with the choir, Madonna staged her Like a Prayer for the Met attendees, complete with cowled backup singers and dancers. Now, some will say all of this is the church engaging the culture. Or is it the church giving in to the culture? The church needs to do some soul searching, I think. Have an exhibit at a museum, sure, as has been done many times in the past, but to allow sacred items to be flanked by raunchy and at times campy knockoffs probably undercuts your message. I've heard it said the exhibit and the Met Gala were meant to point people toward the good, the beautiful, and the true. But to the casual viewer, it's hard to see beyond the garish, narcissistic parade of decadence blocking the view. That is all the time we have for now. Until next week, the show continues on Facebook and Twitter. You can like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter. Let me know what you thought of our cut to the chase. And you can find all of those links at RaymondArroyo.com. Be sure to join us next week. Until then, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, thank you for watching. I'm Raymond Arroyo from Washington, D.C. Bye now.